Trigger warning. This review includes talks of rape and murder. So if this is a sensitive subject for you, please click off right now. Alright, hello my beautiful people and welcome back to my channel. This is a review of In My Daughter's Name. I found it here on YouTube, but on YouTube it says that it's 1982, but when I looked up online, it's actually 1992. So let's get into the review. This movie starts off with a beautiful montage of family photos of a nice family of dad, mom, and two daughters. One appears to be a teenager and the other one is maybe preteens or close to preteens. And then we cut to the mother and the daughters are out shopping for the dad's upcoming birthday. And the older daughter, Carly, her friend pops up into the store and Carly asks if she can, go off with her. The mom agrees. Her name is Laura, but she tells her she has to take her younger sister, Lissa, with her. And she tells her to be home by 5 and to take out the chicken and to put it in the oven for her, which she agrees to. Laura's car breaks down at the mall, so her husband has to pick her up and, they go home. But as they go home, Carly is pulling up with her friend, Martha, that she met at the mall. Like, Martha is dropping Carly and Lisa off. And Laura is upset. She's like, you're just not getting home, so, you're so irresponsible. I can't even count on you to put the chicken in the oven like I asked you to. And they're having dinner, and dinner includes Carly's boyfriend. And when he compliments the meal, I had to laugh because Lissa, because her name is Alyssa, but they call her Lissa, she is such a little butthead because she says, I don't know, I think the chicken was a little underdone. And it's just like, of course, that's a callback to Carly not taking the chicken out for her mom. But Carly, went to go change her clothes because her and Greg are going out later. But it's clear to see that it's a strained relationship between Laura and Carly. And in a conversation with her sister, Laura, and her sister, she says, the relationship between her and Carly is just like the sister and the mom. So it's just like you're seeing it play out later in life. And she's telling her, tell your daughter how good she is at things. Don't just let it fester. And Laura says she doesn't want to hear it from me. And her sister tells her, don't be like mom. Don't make excuses. But, Laura cuts off the conversation and just lets it end there. So it's the night of the party, and Laura and Carly have another blowout because Carly forgot the personalized napkins that they're supposed to have. And Carly says, Mom, I can go get them right now. Laura says, no, don't even bother. I'll go do it myself. And Carly's like, no, Mom, I'm leaving right now. And before she leaves, she tells her mom, I'm sorry, I'm always a disappointment to you. And Laura turns around, to call out to her, but she is already out the door. So Carly picks up the napkins, and when she gets back into the car won't start. And that's like the problem, because it's Laura's car. That's just the problem with the car. It just randomly cuts off, or, if you try to start it up, it won't start back up. And so a stranger comes over to help her, offering to help to see what's wrong with the car. And he gets in and tries to start it. He can't get it started either. He offers her a ride, which at first she declines, but then she accepts. So the owner or the cashier from the store that Carly was just in comes out to say goodnight, but neither of them respond to her. So when the dad comes home, he's truly surprised about his birthday, and the party starts going, and everybody is having a good time. He asks where Carly is, but Laura, doesn't know. So the stranger introduces himself to Carly as Peter. And halfway through the ride, Carly realizes that she forgot the napkins. But also during this ride, Peter is acting weird. Like, he locks the doors. He turns up the music really loud to the point she has to ask him to turn it down. But when she realized she forgot the napkins, there's a gas station coming up. So she tells him, turn into this gas station and we can turn around and get the napkins. But he keeps going. So she starts to notice that something is wrong. And, she's like, what is going on? Do you know a shorter way or something? She starts to panic. She's like, please, just turn back around. What are you doing? And he starts touching her hair and her shoulder. And he's like, I like you, Carly. And I want to party too. And it's just like, ugh. And he takes her into these woods that appear to be by a lake, and he rapes her. So while that is going on, the party is in full swing. Everybody's having a good time. And Greg shows up, of course with a present for the dad, but it looks like he asks where Carly is, or Laura asks him where Carly is, and nobody has seen her. And then we just get a eerie shot of Peter's car just engulfed in darkness. And after the party, there's still no sign of Carly. They're calling around. Nobody's seen her. Greg went to the shop and found the car there, but the car is locked. So it's midnight at this point, and they decide to call the police. The next morning, a man and his son are going fishing, and the boy picks up the bow that Carly had in her hair, and he says, "Look, for mommy," but it's covered in blood. The police show up to their house. They found Carly's body, and they have to go to the morgue to identify the body. And they say, it doesn't have to be a parent. Somebody else can do it. Her sister offers to do it, but Laura stands up. She says, I'll do it. And, she's just very, what do I want to say? Like, she has no emotion, or she's showing no emotion. So it's just like she showed no emotion when she identified the body. When they had the funeral, there's no emotion. And they're sitting down for dinner one night, and the police call. They found the suspect from the prints on the car. And, of course, it's Peter. He pleads not guilty for rape and for murder, which is what he's charged with. So the very first witness is the owner of the shop where Carly was last seen. And she testifies that Carly was seen talking to Peter. And then we have testimony from a detective that says her body was found by the lake, and they found tire tracks matching Peter's car. Then a doctor testifies that Carly died from a jugular hemorrhage. What is it? Brought on by strangulation. It was a slow and painful death. Also, there was skin, blood, and hair found under her fingernails belonging to Peter. Carly fought for her life, and he also left his semen in and on her body. So it just seems like it should be an open and shut case, right? Not at all. So as they're leaving out the courtroom, a woman stops Laura and tells her, I'm sorry about your daughter. So the next day in court, the prosecutor mentions another woman or young lady that Peter attacked and raped, but the defense objects because those charges were, they weren't proven and they were thrown out, so you really can't bring that up. So the defense is now cross-examining the shop owner, and she says that Carly seemed to be in a big hurry, like she almost forgot her change. But when she was locking up to leave, she sees Carly, smiling and talking to Peter. And, they both ignored her, but she puts it off on Carly, says, she ignored me when I spoke to her, saying goodnight. And then he asks what Carly was wearing. And, when it comes to talks of rape, that's always the conversation. What did she have on? How did she was acting? And the shop owner says that she had on a dress and a sweater. And he says, was it a short dress? And she said, yes, a very short dress. But I guess that's how they like it these days. And it's just like, okay, if we're going off the movie and what Carly had on, that dress was not that short. And then the defense also asks if it was a low-cut top. But we don't get to hear her answer because Mr. Elias, the dad, he gets up and he storms out. And when they're back at home, he says he's going back to work. He can't stand to be in the courtroom hearing them pick apart his daughter. And we get a shot of both of the mothers in the bathroom. So that's Laura, which is Carly's mother, and then Mrs. Lipton, who is Peter's mother. And she tells her, I'm so sorry. I have to stand by him. He's my child, my only child. And this is where we're going to pull over, and this is away from the movie. Just because someone is your family member, that doesn't mean that you have to stand by them. If you know that they're doing wrong, it's okay to, turn them in or distance yourself from them. You don't have to be his cheerleader and stand by him just because he's your only child. And if he has brought on other charges like this, do you not see a pattern here? So anytime, and it reminds me of an episode of Law and Order SVU where they knew what he was doing and they just covered it up because they had the money and the privilege to do so. So it's like, just because this is your child or your family member, they get to be as sick and twisted as they want to be. Because let's flip the roles. If this was your child that this happened to, that was raped and murdered, you'd want full justice. So just because you have the money to cover it up, other families just have to deal with it because it's your family member. How is that fair? But Laura tells her, your son is a monster. When I had to go identify my daughter's body, she was beaten to the point I almost didn't recognize her. So when I see your son, I see a monster. What do you see when you look at him? And Mrs. Lipton, she doesn't answer. She just walks away. So the defense is now questioning Greg, asking if he and Carly were sexually active. And when the prosecutor objects, the defense claims that he's trying to establish that Carly was a sexually mature young lady who knew what she was doing when she initiated the encounter with Peter. So they're saying, it wasn't rape. It was just sex that got out of, or they could claim that it's sex that got out of hand if she was sexually active. And Greg says that they were faithful to each other and she would never have sex with anybody else. So that's a yes to that question. So the prosecutor drops the rape charges and they're just going after him for murder. And the defense changes his plea from just not guilty to not guilty by reason of insanity. So he claims that the sodium from the Chinese food that he ate that day, allergy and asthma medication that he was taking, and pop or soda or carbonated drinks, whatever you want to call it, all three of those things combined can trigger a psychotic episode. It can cause someone to become violent and have no memory of what happened. And after closing arguments from both sides, the jury reached a verdict, and they agree that he is not guilty by reason of insanity. And Peter and his mom, like they're celebrating, they're hugging, they're smiling, and Laura is basically falling apart. So when he walks past, she jumps up and she attacks him and she like chokes him out. And they pull him off, but she's now like in limbo. She's being really overprotective of Alyssa. She can't go anywhere. She can't do anything. It's literally like you go to school and you come right back home. And when she goes to pick up Alyssa one day, she sees Greg and Martha. They're now together as a couple. And one night she's having, like, the family is having dinner together. And her sister and her husband suggest that they take Alyssa to Washington just to get away and to allow Laura and Michael to have some alone time together. And Laura freaks out. She says, "You're not taking Alyssa away from me too." And it just makes it so awkward. Laura goes to the psych ward where Peter is staying because, he has to go under a psych evaluation for 90 days. And she talks to the psychiatrist that is there, and she's like, I want to know the status of his case. And of course, she can't talk about that with her. And so Laura camps out until the doctor leaves, and she pretends to be a temp who forgot to type up notes for the doctor. So the late night nurse who's sitting at the front desk, she's really just trying to enjoy a cigarette. So she just hands off the keys to her and says, when you're done, just bring them back. So just that easily, Laura got inside the office and she sees his file. And she sees that it's recommended for him to be released after the 90 days. And she sees his room number, so she goes to his room number, and there's a window that you can just look into. And I guess he can feel eyes on him because he turns and he sees her, so she runs out. So Laura wants to go to the police because it's just like, it's not fair that he gets pleaded out by reason of insanity. All he has to do is spend 90 days in this psych ward, even though there's really nothing wrong with him. And that's it. He just gets to go on with his life. So the woman that stopped her outside of the courtroom to apologize about her daughter is actually the woman of the other girl that the prosecutor mentioned that Peter raped. So Laura goes to her house and asks if they would go with her to the police, but she refuses. She said, please leave. I don't want my daughter to see you. I don't want her to be involved. And Laura tells her, if your daughter had pressed charges, where'd it go? If your daughter pressed charges to begin with, he'd be in jail now. He never would have seen my daughter or had a chance to do this to her. So, of course, the mom is upset and she closes the door in her face. So Laura is now following him, and she's sitting outside of the hospital the day that he gets out. And he gets his car back, and he sees her, looking at him. She follows him to the restaurant where he's eating with the friend who testified on his behalf. And, she's yelling at the people, do you know that this is a rapist and a murderer? Look at him. Make sure he doesn't do this to your daughter. And she's, showing up outside his house. She spray-painted rapist and murderer all over his car. He takes out a restraining order on her. How ironic is that? You raped and murdered this woman's daughter. And so now, of course, she's not going to let this go, but you get to put out a restraining order on her. The irony. And the fact, the law is so twisted. It's like, y'all let this man get away with this because he had money and privilege. But now that the mom, won't let it go, he gets to, quote unquote, protect himself from her. Then Peter has the nerve to show up to her house telling her she should be careful. Lissa is standing in the door, but Laura tells her to go back in the house. So Peter turns to her and says, Lissa, I like her. Then he walks away. So after that, Laura follows him in the mall, just watching his every move. And she sees him talking to a young lady, like he puts his arm around her shoulder, and she just loses it. Laura pulls a gun out of her purse, walks up to Peter, and shoots him multiple times. And it's just like, at this point, I completely understand, because it's like, during the trial, he kept looking at her like smirking, or he would just have a straight face as if he didn't have a care in the world and he was just ready for this to be over, because basically, like, he knew he was going to get away with it. And so it's just like, then you get to go freely, and then you could possibly be preying on another girl. And then you had the nerve to show up to my house, and you basically threatened the only daughter I had left after you killed the first one. You have to die. And I saw no problem with it. So Michael comes to see her in the jail and asks, what was she thinking? And he tells her, you're destroying us. We've already lost Carly, and now we're going to lose you too. And she says, I had to do something. I couldn't move on like you did. So Michael goes to see the prosecutor, basically telling him, you got to get her out of this. But as the prosecutor, there's nothing that he can do. He has to take the case. So Laura now has a defense attorney, and she tells her that her only possible way of getting out of this is pleading not guilty by reason of insanity. And as soon as she hears those words, Laura pops up and she says, no way, I'm not doing that. Because, of course, that's how Peter got off, and there was nothing wrong with him. So when they're in court and her attorney tries to file it in anyway, and she jumps up, she says, no, I won't allow this. And the lawyer tells her, not the lawyer, the judge says, that's for me to decide. And she pulls them into her chambers. And she says, I'm not one for the theatrics, so let's get this cleared away right now. You need to listen to your attorney because she has your best interest at heart. And so the trial goes on. So the prosecutor calls Mrs. Lipton, which is Peter's mom, to the stand. And he's just asking her a bunch of questions about her mental state, like how she's been doing since then. And when the defense objects, saying that he can't possibly ask these type of questions, and he says, I absolutely can, because Mrs. Lipton feels the same way that you guys are claiming that Laura felt, which caused her to kill Peter. So he's asking her, with your grief and you're not being able to eat, sleep, or think, would you kill Laura right now? And Mrs. Lipton says, of course not. And it's like, right, first of all, of course not, because, you want to make it seem like she's just a monster. But then it's like, of course not, because it's not the same circumstance. You wouldn't kill her because you know that she's getting revenge off of something horrible that your son did. It's just, if this was your son, or say you had a daughter and the circumstances which caused him or her to die, because not to say that a man can't be raped as well, you would not be sitting there as calm as you are. It's just a simple fact. I've lost my child, my only child. But really, your child was a horrible person and he deserved to die, but you're not going to think that way. And it's just like, she tried they try to shoot down the defense that she is not insane. But it's just like, you saw her through the trial. She stopped doing her hair. She's just wearing baggier clothes, and she's just stone faced. You can tell that there was really a change in Laura. So it's just like, and one day as they're walking to court, Laura's attorney tells her, you know, you really need to think about this and don't just throw your life away. And Laura tells her, you know, you can't possibly understand what I'm going through, so don't try to lecture me. So the attorney, you know, stops her and tells her, I can remember the date, the time, and how the phone call went when the police called and told her that her daughter was murdered and that she needed to come down to the morgue and identify her body. Her daughter was killed by her boyfriend, who was abusive. And he got away with it. And he now lives, in Tuscan. He now has a wife and 2 kids. So, you know, I'm not doing this just for you. I'm doing this for me as well. You know, we can't just let them get away with this. And so her attorney puts her on the stand, but doesn't question her. And Laura isn't, revoking her Fifth Amendment, you know, to not self-incriminate herself on the stand. And so the prosecutor asks her questions about when, you know, he was trying Peter for the murder of her daughter and how she spoke freely about being outraged about him wanting to pay for what he did to her daughter. And she just delivers a powerful statement that I don't feel like I can do justice. So I'm going to insert it right here.
Let me make it easier for you. I killed Peter Lipton because he killed my daughter and no one did anything about it. He raped her and he murdered her and everyone knew it. The court knew it, his lawyer knew it, his own mother knew it. And no one made him pay. I came to you and I begged you for help. But you did nothing. The police did nothing. The press did nothing. My own husband told me to forget it and get on with my life. Well, I couldn't do that. So I bought a gun and I followed him. And when I saw him talking to that girl who looked so much like my Carly, I knew I could not bring Carly back, but I could keep it from happening again. So I walked up to him and I shot him. I knew exactly what I was doing. I was sane then and I am sane now, but I will not lie to protect myself like he did. I meant to kill Peter Lipton, just like he meant to kill my daughter.
So after that powerful statement from Laura, they take a recess. And when they come back in session, her lawyer decides to redirect and put her back on the stand. So she asks Laura if she's ever got a speeding ticket. Has she ever broken into someone's house? You know, has she ever broken the law in any type of way before? And Laura says no. And her attorney says, so you want us to believe someone who has spent their whole life on the straight and narrow was clear when you walked into that mall surrounded by people and pulled out a gun and shot Peter Lipton 5 times. So she brings up the pills that Laura was prescribed, and they were for hypertension, exhaustion, and anxiety. But Laura says she stopped taking the pills a week before she shot him. And her attorney says, so you were going through withdrawal. And also, have you cried since your daughter's death? And, you know, she's like, did you cry at the funeral? Have you showed any type of emotion for your daughter since she died? And when she asks about the relationship with Carly, Laura says she was a teenager and I was her mother. So it was difficult. And her attorney asks, do you remember the last conversation that you had? What was the last thing you said to her? Or the last thing that Carly said to you? And of course, the last moments that they had together was before Carly went to go get the napkins. And the last thing she told her was that she is so irresponsible. And Carly apologizing for always being a disappointment. So her attorney points out, you feel guilty about that. You feel as if that argument pushed your daughter out the door and right into Peter Lipton's car and in his path. And Laura just breaks down. And her attorney turns to the jury and says, there's no way you can convict this woman or punish her more than she's already punished herself. She doesn't need to be found guilty. And then as they're waiting on, or, just waiting, the prosecutor comes in and offers her a plea deal of voluntary manslaughter and says he'll ask for leniency. And her attorney advised against it. She says, I feel like we can win. But it seems like Laura is bent on going to jail and paying for her crimes because she says she was sane. She could make her own choices. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she has to pay. And her husband, Michael, says, we've paid enough. If there's a chance we can win, let's do that. But instead, Laura takes the plea deal, and the judge gives her 2 years incarcerated and 3 years probation. And the movie ends with her daughter, Lissa, running to hug her. And that's the way it ends. And it's just like a justified ending to a tragic story. Because the lawyer, the judge says, there's been enough heartache. There's been enough tragedy. This just needs to end. And that's the way it ends. And I hope you guys enjoyed my review. Like, comment, subscribe. And I hope you have a beautiful day, night, whenever you're listening. Peace.